I was standing in a snow-covered cabin when I realized my wife was pregnant with my brother's child, and my father looked me in the eye and told me to keep my mouth shut. She said I should be a man and move on. That was the moment I stopped trying to save the family and started watching what happened next. My name is Joseph. I'm 38 years old. I work as a project manager for a mid-sized construction firm outside Denver. I've been doing that kind of work for almost 15 years now. I'm not flashy. I like routines. I like plans that make sense and people who keep their word. I've always believed that if you show up, work hard, and stay loyal, things eventually balance out. I grew up thinking family was the one place where loyalty was guaranteed. I was wrong. When all of this started, I had been married for 7 years. My wife's name was Claire. We met in our late 20s. She was warm, sharp, good at reading people. She laughed easily. She made a house feel lived in. I trusted her in a way I didn't question. That kind of trust is dangerous, I learned later, because you don't notice when it's being used against you. My younger brother, Evan, was always different. 2 years younger than me. Louder. More charming. He failed forward in life. If something went wrong for him, there was always an explanation, always a soft landing. If something went right for me, it was expected. That's how it worked in our family. Our father, Richard, never said it outright, but you could feel it. Evan was the one who needed protecting. Evan was the one who needed understanding. I was the one who needed to be mature and set the example. I did that for most of my life. That December, we rented a cabin in the mountains for Christmas. It was Dad's idea. A reset, he called it. Just family. No distractions. Snow, firewood, quiet nights. Claire loved the idea. She said it sounded peaceful. I remember packing the car. The smell of pine already in the air. Claire humming while she folded sweaters. Evan texting nonstop in the corner of the living room, smiling at his phone. Dad pacing, making sure we hadn't forgotten groceries. Nothing felt off. That's the part that still gets me. The cabin was about 2 hours up the highway. Snow started falling about 30 minutes in. Thick, slow flakes. Claire rested her hand on my leg as I drove. She squeezed it once, absent-mindedly, like she always did. We arrived just before dark. The place was beautiful in that quiet, isolated way. Logs stacked neatly by the door. Smoke curling from the chimney. The kind of place you imagine memories being made. That first night was normal. Too normal. We cooked together. Drank wine. Evan told the same stories he always told, exaggerating just enough to keep everyone laughing. Dad laughed hardest. Claire laughed too. I didn't notice anything strange about that at the time. The second day was when the silence started. Not obvious silence. Just small gaps. Claire stayed inside while Evan and Dad went out to split wood. She said she had a headache. I brought her tea. She smiled, thanked me, kissed my cheek. Everything looked right. Later, when I came back in from shoveling the porch, I noticed her phone face down on the counter. She always kept it face up. Always. When I picked it up to move it, the screen lit for half a second. A notification disappeared before I could read it. I told myself it was nothing. That night, Dad suggested we all turn in early. Long day, he said. Evan yawned theatrically. Claire agreed quickly, which was unusual. She usually liked staying up by the fire with me, talking about nothing. In bed, she turned away from me and said she was exhausted. Her voice sounded flat. I reached for her, and she stiffened just slightly before relaxing again. I noticed. I said nothing. The next morning, I woke up early. The cabin was quiet. Too quiet. Dad's room door was open, bed untouched. Evan's door was closed. Claire wasn't beside me. I assumed she was in the kitchen. She wasn't. I walked downstairs, listening to the creak of the wood under my feet. The smell of coffee wasn't there. No movement. I called her name softly. No answer. That was when I noticed Evan's door wasn't just closed. It was locked. I stood there longer than I want to admit. Just standing, listening, telling myself not to jump to conclusions. Telling myself families don't do that. Wives don't do that. Brothers don't do that. Then I heard Claire's laugh. It was quiet, muffled, familiar. Something cold moved through my chest. Not anger. Not yet. Just a heavy, sinking certainty. I knocked once. Hard. Silence. I knocked again. Harder. The door opened a few inches. Evan stood there, shirtless, eyes wide. Behind him, Claire sat on the edge of the bed, wrapped in a blanket. Her hair was messy. Her face drained of color. For a second, no one spoke. Then Evan said my name, like a question. I don't remember what I said. I remember the sound of my own voice, distant, like it belonged to someone else. I remember asking how long. I remember Claire crying immediately, hands covering her face, saying, "I didn't mean for this to happen." I remember Evan saying, "It just happened," like that explained anything. Dad came down the hall then. He must have heard the noise. He looked at all three of us, took in the scene in about half a second, and sighed. Actually sighed. "Daniel," he said, rubbing his face. "This isn't how I wanted you to find out." Find out. Those words landed harder than anything else. I said something about betrayal, about my marriage, about my brother. My voice shook. I didn't yell. I couldn't. I felt hollow. Dad's expression hardened. The one I'd seen 1,000 times growing up. The one that meant I was about to be corrected. "Stop being dramatic," he said. "This doesn't need to turn into a scene." Claire finally looked at me then. Her eyes were red, but there was something else there too. Irritation. Almost resentment. "I'm pregnant," she said. The hallway felt smaller. Dad nodded once, like that settled things. "See? That's exactly why you need to calm down. We'll figure this out like adults. Keep your mouth shut for now." I stared at him. At her. At my brother, who couldn't meet my eyes. Claire spoke again. Her voice steadier now. "Be a man, Dan. Move on. This isn't about you anymore." That was the moment something in me went quiet. Not anger. Not sadness. Just resolve. I didn't say another word. I went back into our room. Packed a bag. Slowly. Carefully. Claire didn't follow me. Dad didn't stop me. Evan didn't apologize. As I stepped out into the snow, the air burned my lungs. The cabin door closed behind me with a soft, final sound. I drove away without knowing where I was going. What I didn't know then was that this wasn't the worst part. Not even close. I drove for almost 3 hours before I pulled over. The snow got heavier the farther down the mountain I went. My hands were locked tight on the steering wheel, knuckles white, shoulders stiff like I was bracing for impact even though the road was empty. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I didn't hit the dashboard like people do in movies. I just kept replaying Claire's voice. "Be a man. Move on." I pulled into a gas station just off the highway. It was one of those places that stayed lit all night, humming quietly, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. I sat in the car with the engine off, watching my breath fog the windshield. My phone was buzzing in the cup holder. I didn't pick it up right away. Eventually I did. 3 missed calls from Claire. 1 from Evan. 1 from Dad. A text from Claire came through as I stared at the screen. "We need to talk like adults. Please don't do anything rash." Rash. I laughed then. A short, empty sound that startled the woman pumping gas at the next car over. I turned the phone off. I slept in the car that night, wrapped in my coat, head resting against the window. It wasn't comfortable, but it was quiet. And for the first time since that cabin door closed behind me, no one was telling me how I was supposed to feel. The next morning, I drove straight back to Denver. I didn't go home. I didn't want to walk into a house that still smelled like Claire's shampoo. I booked a cheap hotel near my office. The kind of place that smells faintly like bleach and old carpet. I took a shower and stood under the hot water longer than I needed to, letting it pound against the back of my neck. I watched the water swirl down the drain and thought about how easily things disappear when you stop holding on. When I got dressed, my phone was on again. This time, there were more messages. "Dad, call me. We need to handle this the right way." "Evan, I didn't mean for it to happen like this." "Claire, you're overreacting. Please come back so we can talk." I didn't respond. I went to work. That might sound strange, but work was the only place where things still made sense. Deadlines. Tasks. Meetings. No emotional landmines. No one asking me to swallow betrayal for the sake of peace. I sat through meetings, nodded at the right moments, answered emails. My boss asked if everything was okay. I said I had a family issue. He told me to take the rest of the day if I needed it. I said I was fine. That night, alone in the hotel room, the anger finally showed up. Not explosive anger. Not screaming into a pillow anger. The kind that settles into your bones. I opened my laptop and started searching for divorce attorneys. I didn't tell anyone yet. Not friends. Not coworkers. I needed clarity before I let anyone else into it. Every attorney website looked the same. Stock photos of smiling professionals. Words like compassionate and aggressive representation. I filled out 3 contact forms. Closed the laptop. Sat on the edge of the bed. That was when Claire showed up. I hadn't told her where I was staying, but she knew my patterns. She always did. There was a knock at the door. Soft. Careful. I didn't move. Another knock. Louder this time. Dan, she said. I know you're in there. I stayed seated, staring at the carpet. She knocked again, then tried the handle. Locked. Please, she said. We can't do this like strangers. That word again. We. I opened the door eventually. Not because I wanted to talk, but because I didn't want her making a scene in the hallway. She stepped inside like she still belonged there. She looked tired. Her eyes were swollen. She was wearing the gray sweater I bought her 2 winters ago. The one she always wore when she wanted comfort. She looked at me like I was the one who had disappeared on her. I'm scared, she said immediately. I nodded once. Good. She flinched. That's not fair. Neither is sleeping with my brother. She looked away. Sat on the edge of the bed like it was still hers. It wasn't planned, she said. You know that. I leaned against the wall. Crossed my arms. You don't accidentally end up pregnant with your husband's brother. She sighed, frustrated. You're making this about betrayal when it's more complicated than that. Explain it to me, I said. Slowly. She rubbed her temples. You and we were stuck. You were always working. Always tired. Evan listened. He made me feel seen. I stared at her. So you slept with him. It wasn't just sex, she snapped. That's what you don't get. I felt something tighten in my chest. I don't want to get it. She stood up. Walked closer. I'm pregnant, Dan. That changes things. Yes, I said. It changes who you are to me. She reached for my arm. I stepped back. Dad called while she was still standing there. I let it ring. She glanced at my phone. You should answer, she said. He's trying to help. He told me to keep my mouth shut. He was trying to protect the family. I laughed again. Which family? She didn't answer. She left eventually. Not angry. Just disappointed. Like I'd failed her. The next morning, I met with a lawyer. Her name was Melissa Grant. Late 40s. Calm voice. Sharp eyes. No nonsense. She listened without interrupting. Took notes. Asked precise questions. Are you sure the child is your brother's? She asked. Yes. Do you want to contest anything? Custody assets. I want out, I said. Cleanly. She nodded. Given the circumstances, that's reasonable. But you should prepare yourself. Your family may not take this well. They already haven't. I signed the paperwork to begin the process. When Claire was served, she called me screaming. You're destroying everything, she said. No, I said. You did. I'm just not pretending otherwise. Dad called next. His voice was cold. You're being selfish, he said. This will ruin Evan. Evan ruined himself. He's stepping up. You're abandoning your responsibilities. I'm not raising my brother's child. Silence on the line. Then, you've always been difficult. That one almost hurt. Almost. I moved out permanently a week later. Packed my things while Claire was at an appointment. I took my clothes, my books, my tools. I left the couch. The dishes. The photos. I left the life I thought I had. What I didn't know yet was that Evan and Claire were already planning their next move. And Dad was already helping them. I found out a month later, when a mutual friend mentioned that Evan and Claire were starting a business together. Something family-oriented. Something Dad was investing in. I stared at my phone after reading that message, a slow understanding settling in. They hadn't just replaced me. They'd erased me. And for the first time since the cabin, I felt something else rise beneath the anger. Patience. Because I knew something they didn't. I had already stopped protecting them. The business started as a rumor. That's how most things like that begin. Quietly. Passed along by someone who doesn't realize how much damage a single sentence can do. I was grabbing coffee with Mark, a guy I'd worked with years earlier who still kept loose ties with my family. We weren't close friends, more like professional acquaintances who occasionally crossed paths. He mentioned Evan casually, like it was small talk. Saw your brother the other day, he said. Looks like he's got something new going on. I didn't ask. I already knew what was coming. Yeah, Mark continued, stirring his drink. He and Claire started some kind of home decor business. Custom cabins, rustic stuff. Online sales. Your dad's backing it. I nodded once. Good for them. Mark hesitated. You don't sound surprised. I'm not. He changed the subject after that, but the word stayed with me. Custom cabins. I almost laughed. They were turning the place where my marriage collapsed into a brand. That night, curiosity got the better of me. I looked it up. The website was clean. Well-designed. Photos of reclaimed wood tables, handmade shelves, cozy staged rooms with soft lighting. Claire was always good at aesthetics. Evan was always good at selling a story. The About Us page talked about family. About new beginnings. About building something meaningful together. There was no mention of me. Not even indirectly. I closed the laptop and sat there for a long time. This was the part people don't talk about. The part after the explosion, when everyone else starts rearranging the wreckage into something that looks livable. When you're expected to either disappear or smile politely and let them rewrite the past. I chose neither. A week later, I ran into my father at the grocery store. I hadn't planned it. I was reaching for bread when I saw him at the end of the aisle. He looked thinner, older. His shoulders slumped slightly, like the weight of things had finally started to show. He saw me and stiffened. "Daniel," he said. "Dad." We stood there, carts between us like a physical boundary. "I heard you're doing well," he said. "Work's good." "It is." He nodded. "That's good. I'm glad." Silence stretched. "You didn't have to do this the way you did," he said finally. I met his eyes. "You didn't have to tell me to keep my mouth shut." He frowned. "You know I was trying to hold things together." "For who?" He didn't answer. "Evan's business," I said. "Looks like it's taking off." A flicker of pride crossed his face before he caught himself. "They're working hard. I'm sure." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "You could still be part of this, you know. We're family." I felt something twist in my stomach. Family doesn't ask you to swallow betrayal for convenience. He sighed. "You always take things so personally." That was the sentence that ended whatever hope I had left. "I'm done," I said. "With all of it." He looked at me like he didn't recognize me. Maybe he didn't. The divorce dragged on longer than I wanted. Claire contested small things. Furniture. Accounts. She didn't want the house, but she wanted control. Leverage. Her lawyer sent emails that felt more like lectures than negotiations. "You're being unreasonable," one said. "Given the circumstances, cooperation would be beneficial." Beneficial for who? Melissa handled it calmly. Methodically. She never promised revenge. She promised clarity. "You don't need to destroy them," she told me once. "You just need to stop protecting them." That stuck with me. Because even after everything, I realized I was still doing it. Still keeping quiet. Still letting people assume this was a mutual split. Still letting Evan play the role of the reformed man stepping up. So I stopped. Not publicly. Not loudly. Just truthfully. When people asked, I answered simply. My wife had an affair with my brother. She's pregnant. I filed for divorce. No embellishment. No emotion. The reactions did the rest. Some people went quiet. Some apologized awkwardly. Some clearly didn't know what to say. But the story changed. It stopped being vague. It stopped being something that could be smoothed over with euphemisms. And cracks started to form. A supplier backed out of a deal with Evan's company. Quietly. A review appeared online questioning their values. An investor asked more questions than Evan was prepared to answer. Nothing dramatic. Just pressure. Dad called me one night, angry. "You're poisoning people against them," he said. "I'm telling the truth." "You're doing this on purpose." "Yes." There was silence. Then, "What do you want?" I thought about that. "I want distance." "That's it. For now." He hung up on me. Meanwhile, Claire started reaching out again. Emails this time. Long ones. Reflective ones. "I didn't realize how alone I felt," one said. "I never meant to hurt you," another said. "We could have handled this differently." I didn't respond. The business kept going. On the surface, at least. But I knew how these things worked. I'd managed projects long enough to recognize when something was stretched thin, when cash flow mattered more than image, when stress started to leak into decisions. Evan wasn't built for that. He called me one night, drunk. "You think you're better than me," he slurred. "I don't think about you at all," I said. "That's a lie," he snapped. "You're trying to ruin me. You did that yourself." He laughed bitterly. "Dad always liked you more anyway." That almost made me feel sorry for him. Almost. By spring, the divorce was finalized. I signed the last papers in Melissa's office. She slid them across the desk with a small nod. "You're free," she said. It didn't feel like freedom yet. It felt like standing in the aftermath of a storm, waiting to see what was still standing. I moved apartments, changed routines, started running in the mornings. Not to punish myself, just to feel something consistent. One evening, I got a message from Mark again. "You didn't hear this from me," he said, "but Evan's business is in trouble. Loans. Missed payments. Your dad's stressed." I stared at the message for a long time. I didn't feel joy. I felt inevitability. Because when you build something on denial, it eventually collapses under its own weight. And this time, I wasn't there to catch them. What I didn't know yet was how far Dad would go to fix it, or who he'd expect to pay the price. I found that out a few weeks later, when he showed up at my door unannounced. And this time, he wasn't angry. He was afraid. My dad stood in the hallway like he didn't know where to put his hands. He'd aged quickly, not just physically. Something in his posture had collapsed inward. The man who once filled rooms with certainty now looked like he was borrowing space. I didn't know where else to go, he said. I didn't invite him in right away. We stood there, the door half open, the late afternoon light cutting across the floor between us. I thought about all the times I'd been told to handle things quietly, to be understanding, to keep the peace. I stepped aside. He walked in slowly, eyes scanning the apartment. Small, clean, minimal. No family photos. No traces of the life he'd once walked into freely. This is nice, he said. It's enough, I replied. He sat at the kitchen table, rested his elbows like the weight of them mattered. I poured coffee out of habit, set a mug in front of him. He didn't touch it. They're in trouble, he said. I leaned against the counter. You already said that. It's worse than you think. He rubbed his hands together. Loans. Personal guarantees. I co-signed things I shouldn't have. I waited. Evan can't make payroll next month, he continued. Suppliers are pulling out. Orders are slowing down. I nodded once. That happens. He looked up sharply. You don't have to sound so cold. I met his gaze. You didn't sound warm when you told me to keep my mouth shut. Silence again. He looked down. Claire's pregnancy complications are costing more than expected, he said quietly. Insurance doesn't cover everything. Evan's panicking. And you're here because? He swallowed. Because you're still family. There it was. The word they only used when they needed something. What do you want? I asked. He hesitated. A loan. Temporary. Just to stabilize things. I laughed softly. Not mocking. Just tired. You want me to fund the business my wife started with my brother after they betrayed me. When you say it like that, that's exactly how it is. He leaned forward. Daniel, I know I handled things poorly. I know I said things I shouldn't have. But this is bigger than all that. This is about a child. Your nephew. I felt something stir then. Not guilt. Not anger. Clarity. You didn't come here to apologize, I said. You came here to fix your mistake. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. I won't do it, I said calmly. His face tightened. You're really going to let them fail? I'm not letting anything happen, I said. I'm just not stopping it. He stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. This is vindictive. No, I said. This is boundaries. He paced, ran a hand through his thinning hair. You've always been stubborn. Always had to be right. I stayed quiet. Your mother would be ashamed, he snapped. That one landed. But not the way he intended. My mother left because she was tired of being told to swallow things, I said. Just like you told me to. He froze. I hadn't said her name out loud in years. He knew that. She warned me, he said quietly. About you. I smiled faintly. She warned you I wouldn't break. He left without another word. That night, I slept better than I had in months. The fallout didn't take long. Evan's company missed a payment. Then another. A lien appeared. Then a lawsuit threat from a supplier. Dad sold his car. Then dipped into retirement funds. It still wasn't enough. Claire reached out again. Not reflective this time. Angry. You're doing this on purpose, she wrote. You're punishing an unborn child. I never thought you could be this cruel. I deleted the emails. A mutual acquaintance told me Evan had started drinking heavily, that he'd been snapping at employees, that he blamed everyone else. Dad called twice more. I didn't answer. One afternoon, Melissa emailed me. You may want to be aware. Your father attempted to leverage your name as potential collateral in a negotiation. It didn't work, but I wanted you informed. I stared at the screen for a long time. That was the moment something shifted. Up until then, I'd been reacting, holding ground, letting consequences unfold naturally. Now I acted. Not publicly, not emotionally, strategically. I gathered documentation, emails, messages, dates, financial disclosures from the divorce that hinted at how the business was funded. I didn't leak them. I didn't threaten anyone. I simply made sure they were ready. Because when things collapse, people look for someone to blame. And this time, it wouldn't be me. The business folded 2 months later. Quietly. No announcement. The website went offline overnight. Social media pages disappeared. Inventory was liquidated at a loss. Dad stopped calling. I ran into him again months later, outside a clinic. He looked smaller somehow. We lost the house, he said. I nodded. Evan's living with a friend, he added. Claire moved back with her parents. I waited. He looked at me, eyes glassy. Was it worth it? I thought about that. About the cabin, the hallway, the words keep your mouth shut. About how easily they decided my role was to absorb pain so others wouldn't feel uncomfortable. Yes, I said. He flinched. I didn't do this to you, I continued. I stopped protecting you from what you did. He turned away, walked off without another word. That winter, I stood in my apartment looking out at the city lights. No chaos, no drama, just quiet. I wasn't happy yet, but I was whole. And for the first time, I knew the story was almost over. What I didn't know was how Claire would try one last time to rewrite it. That came in the form of a letter, handwritten, left in my mailbox, and reading it forced me to make one final choice. The letter sat in my mailbox for 2 days before I touched it. I noticed it the first night when I came home from work. White envelope. My name written carefully in Claire's handwriting. No return address. Just Daniel in that neat, familiar script I used to recognize instantly. I left it there. The next morning, it was still there, waiting, like it wasn't in any hurry. That felt fitting. I brought it inside on the third night, set it on the kitchen counter, didn't open it. I cooked dinner, ate standing up, cleaned the pan, still didn't open it. When I finally did, it wasn't curiosity. It was acceptance. Inside was 3 pages. Handwritten, careful, controlled. She'd always written like that when she wanted to sound sincere. She started with an apology. Not for the affair. Not really. For how things were handled. For the pain caused on all sides. For how everything spiraled. She wrote about the pregnancy. About fear. About loneliness. About how she felt trapped between choices she didn't know how to make. She wrote about Evan. How he wasn't what she thought he was. How pressure broke him. How he disappeared when things got hard. She wrote about Dad. How his support came with conditions. How it turned into control. How she felt suffocated. Then she wrote the part she actually wanted me to read. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even expect kindness. But I need you to know I never stopped thinking about you. You were stability. You were safety. I didn't understand that until it was gone. I read that line twice. She ended the letter by saying she was moving away, starting over, that she hoped one day we could talk, not as husband and wife, just as people who shared a history. She signed it with her full name. Not Love, Claire, just her name. I folded the letter slowly and put it back in the envelope. Then I sat down. There was a time when a letter like that would have unraveled me. When I would have read between the lines, searched for sincerity, wondered if closure meant reopening wounds. But that time had passed. I didn't hate her. That surprised me. I thought hate would be the last thing to go. What I felt instead was distance. Not the bitter kind. The clear kind. I never responded. A week later, I found out she'd moved back east with her parents. Evan didn't go with her. He bounced between friends, then couches, then nowhere in particular. Dad stopped reaching out entirely. Months passed. Life filled the space. Work changed. I took on a bigger role. More responsibility. More say. I stopped avoiding the future and started planning for it again. I made new routines. New quiet joys. Morning runs. Cooking meals I actually sat down to eat. Weekends that weren't about recovery. I dated, eventually. Slowly. Carefully. I didn't tell anyone my story up front. I didn't know it to them. When I did share pieces, I watched how they reacted. That mattered more than what they said. One night, I ran into Mark again. Same coffee shop. Same casual tone. Heard your dad moved, he said. Where to? Smaller place. Out of state, I think. I nodded. Okay. He asks about you sometimes. I looked out the window. Snow was falling again. Different winter. Same quiet. What do you tell him? Mark shrugged. That you're doing fine. That was enough. The last time I saw my father was accidental. We crossed paths at a hardware store. He was thinner, slower. His hands shook slightly as he picked up a box of screws. He saw me and froze. We stood there like two strangers who shared a face. I hear you're doing well, he said. I am. He nodded. I'm glad. Silence. I should have handled things differently, he said finally. I looked at him. Really looked. At the man who taught me how to ride a bike. How to swing a hammer. How to swallow things for the sake of peace. Yes, I said. He flinched slightly, then nodded. I don't expect forgiveness, he added. I know. We stood there another moment. Then he turned and walked away. That was it. No reconciliation. No dramatic closure. Just an ending that fit the story. People sometimes ask if I regret how things played out. If I wish I'd been louder sooner. Softer later. More forgiving. I tell them no. Because here's the truth no one likes to hear. Silence is expensive. It costs you pieces of yourself over time. You don't notice it happening. You think you're being mature, reasonable, strong, until one day you realize the people who benefit most from your silence are the ones hurting you. I didn't ruin anyone's life. I stopped sacrificing mine. And in the end, that was the quietest revenge of all. Not punishment, not exposure. Just walking away and letting reality do what it always does when no one is protecting lies anymore. It settles. And so did I. If this story felt uncomfortably familiar, you're not alone. Subscribe if you want more real, honest stories about betrayal, boundaries, and choosing yourself when no one else does.